Yes, hello, welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my OP kit retrospectives. And as you can see on the screen there, we're back with part 2 of our Dungeons and Dragons set. We're in the Battle for Faerun OP kits, and I'm joined once again by Daniel and Craig from Ready Set Roll podcast. Hello, gents.
Hello.
Hey, buddy.
Now, if you'd like to know a little bit more about Daniel and Craig, and you've not already done so, stop this video now. Go back and watch part 1, where they lay out their credentials and it's fully established that they know a bazillion times more than me about D&D. They also tell us a little bit about their podcast. Then once you finish part 1, come back. Deal? Cool. Okay, then. So we've done card 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about card 4, 5, and 6 today. And I'm going to kick us off with card number 4, which is the Halfling Thief Minion Lords Alliance. I've got a spotlight on my card. Let me just line it up so I can read it. There we go. So the Halfling Thief is good, Halo-y, is equipable. Or I'll tell you what, guys, we've got another one of those little kind of affiliation symbols.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the Lords Alliance, presumably.
Looks. Yeah.
Looks.
I'm not as good with the whole alliance and guild signs and everything like Craig is on that front.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, Dan, I don't know, but I might have left my Guildmaster's Guide to Rivia downstairs in your basement. But I don't think we were going to stop the podcast or the podcast and video to go get it.
Don't get it. Well, I'll read the Halfling Thief game text. So it says your opponent may not deal damage to this character during the main step, and that's on their first 2 levels, so they can deal damage in the main step. So this, gents, is all about the kind of flow of steps in the game. In Dice Masters, you have the draw and roll, which is where you get your dice rolls. Mm-hmm. Then you have the main step, where you take a core set of actions, so you can initiate game text on cards, you can field characters, put characters into your field, you can use action dice, which I suppose in equivalency is like cast your spells or gear up, get your equipment out. Then you move into an attack step where the combat takes place. So this Halfling Thief now, during that kind of main step where we do all your core actions, is untouchable when she's at smaller levels. And I use the phrase she because the picture's a female. Mm-hmm. So halflings, I kind of sort of know they're a bit like Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Halflings are fun-loving creatures who have their jollies on enjoying each other's company, living in burrows. Like we said, this Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of Tolkien
loot player there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, halflings are typically bards, thieves. Trying to think of one more thing they typically are. Craig, do you know that halflings can normally be?
Well, you like to play them as a barbarian.
Barbarian one time. Just a raging little short stack of fury. But yeah, halflings are small creatures in D&D. In Dungeons and Dragons, there's different size categories, all the way to like tiny. And halflings are small creatures, which means they are one size smaller than, say, a dwarf, who's a medium creature. So they're able to like duck and dodge between creatures that are bigger than them. They got sticky hands.
They can occupy the same space as another creature because they are so small.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like in the image where she's got, I know, some...
another cool thing about...
sideburns.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another cool thing about halflings are they have a natural ability of being lucky. So if you roll like crap, you can re-roll and get a better one.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay. So this game text where they can't receive damage during the main step is all very reflective of that. It reflects the size, reflects the fact that they're very lucky because they're, like you say, they can duck and dive, wheedle their way out of little tricky situations. Now, the sort of thing in the game of Dice Masters, in the main step, that people would do would be kind of what we describe as direct damage gain texts. So you'd, like Magic Missile, for example, you can pay a bolt, which is a type of energy in Dice Masters, to shoot points of damage across the field, and that takes place in the main step. But you can't shoot a halfling. Too small, too lucky. Yeah, very good.
I've never known a magic missile to miss.
I have many a times.
Magic Missile's a great card in the game of Dice Masters. It comes with what's called a global effect. So there's certain action windows where you can just pay an energy and deal a point of damage to a character. Just ping, which is great. And if you, I mentioned to you, I don't know whether it was while we were recording or not, but like the kobolds, they come with very low defense numbers. They're what you call a weenie character. And you need a kobold in the field alive to make your other kobolds that are in your dice bag to be relevant. So Magic Missiles are...
It's called pack tactics, my friend. Pack tactics.
Exactly that. Exactly. In Dice Masters, it's not actually on any of these cards, but it's called Swarm. So once you've got one, you can kind of rush, and it creates a larger roll in your turn. So exactly that, pack tactics.
Yeah.
So things like Magic Missile or little direct damage tactics of that nature are very popular, because if you take out that kobold, your opponent doesn't get the benefit of that swarm the following turn. Whereas this Halfling Thief is tricky, from what you tell me.
Yeah.
So I've seen, as I mentioned, I know the whole Halfling thing from the Tolkien. And is that a kind of lift and drop then? It sounds like it is. Fun-loving, live in burrows, rock it out with their loots.
Yeah, and like I said, there's various subtypes and iterations of halflings. Like there's stout halflings who get more of a dwarven take, where they can consume bunches of alcohol and stand the tide.
And then you have the ghastly ones, which are a little bit more frail, and they would be more suited for a thief because they're more, bouncy, if you will.
Did you say ghastly?
Yes.
Yeah. Like GHASTLY. Yeah.
Like the Pokemon.
Yeah, I thought you said, for a moment, I thought you said gassy ones. Like, like I just had a vision of a lot of halfling thieves eating beans around a fire, the blazing saddle scene or something. Like, these are the gassy halflings. Just thought I'd clear that up. Okay, bro. So there's the Halfling Thief. We'll move on to card number 5. This is the Treant. And I'm very curious about this one. I don't know a great deal about Treants at all. But the Treant is now a legendary beast. It's got the monster tag, but it's a good monster. It's got good and monster, which was something I struggled to bear my head around when I first started playing D&D Dice Masters. His game text reads, the Treant costs 1 less to field for each active good character you control that is not a Treant. And then he's got an additional game text, one of those global effects, where you can pay a shield, prevent the next 2 damage that you take from an ability or an action die this turn. So he's a very expensive character to begin with. He's a 6 cost, but he's got big, beefy statistics in the Dice Masters context. But you can make him cheaper by accruing lots of smaller good characters to begin with. And then a very defensive, protective ability in terms of preventing damage. So tell me a little bit about Treants first, because I don't really get this. They look like talking trees.
Well, Dan, let me real quick. Not all monsters in D&D are evil. So I know you said that you didn't understand that at first. So let's put this in the perspective of like a dragon. Not all dragons are evil. Some dragons are good dragons, and they will go out to try to right wrongs and stuff like that. A Treant basically is a protector of the woods type of situation.
Sure.
But Dan, I know I made you do the research on the cards, so go right ahead.
As far as the defensive ability goes, Treants naturally have resistances to things like being stabbed by a spear or hit by something that's bludgeoning. But axe is, normal. Very vulnerable to fire, which I'm surprised they didn't add that as a caveat on the card. But now the section about them being easier to bring out whenever they're surrounded by good characters, I don't know how well that plays into treants in Dungeons and Dragons, because they come about whenever there's high magic throughout an ancient forest.
Right.
They are sleeping trees that eventually wake up and become these colossal entities. You can actually play around with their size. You can make them as small as like a small maple sapling or as large as a redwood. Which, if you've ever seen the redwood forest before, those things can get to be over 100 feet tall. Yeah. But they also have a unique ability to awaken other trees around them.
Right.
Which can bring in more forces for them to battle. But yeah, they are naturally good creatures who protect the forest. But sometimes treants can be corrupted if they are in an area of desecration or evil. Right. They become like corrupted, like thorny looking monstrosities.
Sure.
But, so as far as the card goes, I don't know if it matches up as well as treants and lore of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's still, I like the concept of the more good creatures you have, the easier to bring out the good tree guardian of the forest and whatnot.
Yeah, so it's kind of semi there, isn't it? It's got the protective element with that global ability, but it's I suppose it's a Dice Masters interpretation that sort of works in the context of the game in that way, Although I'd love to see a corrupted treant in the game. That'd be really interesting.
Surprisingly, very charismatic creatures.
Sure. Are they playable characters, or are these generally non-playable characters?
No. Generally speaking, they're just kind of stationary creatures.
Sure.
So you don't really see a big tree walking around, except in our space campaign that we touched on, where I made a whole race of tree people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very good. And how do they get around?
Through teleporting through trees.
Right, okay. Yeah, you didn't just rig them up with a kind of cart system or something.
No.
or like Wall-E, floating little platforms.
He's on rails.
Yeah, a whole world on conveyor belts of trees just moving around on conveyor belts.
Oh, actually, you know what? The good creature thing does come in because elves and treants work together, and elves are actually capable of creating treants through their magic. I just remembered that.
Okay, sure. So there's the connection there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Yeah, in the card pool in Dice Masters, the sort of thing that the treants would be played with a lot would be stuff like there's a unicorn, good character, which I've always imagined to be a kind of like woodland creature, and there's some. Just my memory's failing me now. But yeah, these kind of what you would envisage as woodland style creatures, in your understanding of mythology, I suppose, less so D&D, even though D&D is very largely drawn upon a number of mythologies. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, excellent. So there's the treant. And the last one in this set is the Copper Dragon, which, interestingly enough, Dan Craig is a good dragon. So he's got the good symbol. He's got the monster symbol. He's got a game mechanic called Breath Weapon, where they can deal this kind of large area effect of damage, which I think is pretty self-explanatory for a dragon.
Yes.
And then his secondary game text: when you KO an opposing character with Copper Dragon's Breath Weapon, you may move a non-player character die from your use pile to your prep area. Now, non-player character dice are like the core dice used in Dice Masters. They're called sidekicks in the superhero version of the game. They are your main source of purchase power because you have 5 sides that are the purchase energy, and then one side which represents a small weenie character that is the non-player character. So depending on your role, then you can spend it as the energy type, or you can add it to your field as a character. So what this character is doing, if it successfully manages to kill something with its breath weapon, is it gives you more dice to roll in your next turn, which is obviously a huge benefit for the player. One thing I'm interested in, so this Copper Dragon, despite his breath weapon, isn't very offensive in terms of his stats. I always imagine dragons to be big, beastly characters, whereas this guy actually, even though he's quite defensive in terms of his statistics, he's not very offensive, which surprises me.
So like I said before, some dragons are good. So the way that dragons are made, it's there are metallic and chromatic dragons. So metallic dragons would be your golds, your silvers, bronze, brass, so on and so forth. And then you have chromatic dragons, which are red, green, blue. And now they come from two different dragon deities. You have Bahamut, he is a good dragon, and you have Tiamat, who is she's the queen of the bad dragons. So based on that, that's where they get their this is a good one, this is a bad one. Now, the way I think that this is going, as far as like he's very defensive and not very offensive, those type of dragons, the metallic dragons, like I said before, they don't really go out and try to offensively create damage and stuff. They're more protectors.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that copper dragons are actually known as very fierce combatants, though, out of metallic dragons. Actually, rivals with red dragons in the Dungeons and Dragons lore. The breath weapon they use is a big spray of acid that covers enemies, but they also have a unique breath weapon as well that slows enemies. It's a kind of slowing breath. But yeah, copper dragons are even-tempered dragons, but they also are known as lovable pranksters and enjoy telling jokes and riddles. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, if you don't laugh at their jokes, they get kind of angry because it's like, my joke's funny. Why aren't you laughing at my joke?
Sounds like my daughter.
Yeah.
Well, so I certainly wouldn't discern that from the game text. That they're pranksters and jokesters. So there's a lovely little layer there, and that's one thing that occurs to me. This idea that copper dragons, for example, love to tell a good joke but get grumpy if you don't laugh. Where's the what word I'm looking for? What's the driving inspiration for that? Is this characters who played copper dragons or have dungeon mastered a copper dragon and created that personality for a character, and then it's just kind of seeped into the lore that it's understood? Or is this from kind of the expanded universe type stuff where there's, comic books and novels and flavor text from the manuals that's driving this?
This was the creators making the personalities for the dragons from the monster manuals and the Dungeon Master's Guide and all of that. Because with dragons, each dragon has like their own layer and their own terrain that they love to favor. Copper dragons themselves are more inhabitants of arid rocky regions. So warmer climates, stuff like that. While a blue dragon is more at home in the desert.
Oh.
And
I thought a blue dragon would be like snowy ice.
That's white dragons.
That's white dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, sure.
The cool thing is if you have when you play D&D, specifically if you are running the game, you can get a book called the Monster Manual. And in the Monster Manual, it has like paragraphs on paragraphs of each, like every little thing on all the different monsters, whether they like to be, what they like to do. Let's take goblins as an example. Goblins are very crafty creatures. Just because their stats, they're kind of stupid, doesn't mean that they don't know how to make simple traps for people. Mm. So that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. And then people just kind of take that and run with it.
Yeah, although there must be a lot of pressure on Dungeon Masters to be true to, that it's a game of imagination, but would you maybe find yourself in a position where one of your players would go, that copper dragon isn't funny, isn't getting grumpy at me because I'm not laughing at the jokes. You're not playing the game right.
So, yes, I understand what you're saying. There are people that are like that, and they take the rules and everything as written super seriously. But it's kind of like they say in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie about parlay. The rules are meant to be guidelines and not strictly followed. You can bend and not break some of the stuff, and it's still to make it more fun for everybody.
The code.
I was going to say, so that's where Craig sits. Where do you sit with that, Daniel?
I'm more or less like, that was Jack Sparrow's dad, right? The keeper of the code. If I'm not mistaken.
Keith Richards.
Yeah, the keeper of the code. I'm kind of in his court a little bit. The code is the code. And he shot that one dude who was like talking down on the code.
We in Dice Masters we call them the rules lawyers.
Oh yeah,
the rules lawyers. Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, anything else on the Copper Dragon before I wrap us up?
A cool thing about dragons, especially with metallic dragons and the copper dragon, is the shinier their scales, the typical more good they are, like the better dragon they are. While the darker or less colorful of their scales are still good, but eviler in some interpretations.
Eviler. So I was going to ask about that while I had you, actually. So I understand there's, or I've got a knowledge of, you would say good, neutral good, evil, neutral evil, or there's like some sort of, I've seen a 9-part grid, sort of where you'd place your character in terms of predilection.
The way that's all set up is you have there is chaotic, neutral, and lawful, right? And then that will go as good or evil or like neutral. So, but just because a character is lawful evil does not mean that they are just evil for evil's sake. In our game on Ready, Set, Roll, Dan plays a lawful evil character, but he is not evil if you like really think about it. His character, since it's set in space, will do anything for the human race. And that goes so far as to he would exterminate another race if that means that they would do something to the human race. That makes him a lawful character because he has a strict code, but he is willing to do evil to get his way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like a knight who serves an evil king. He follows the code of his king. But with copper dragons, they're typically chaotic good. They are greedy, can be greedy, envious, and stingy. So like whenever it comes to like gold, they are very protective of their hoard and their treasures. They will some copper dragons sometimes keep bards in their lairs as entertainers. But if they find the bard's been sneaking a few extra copper here and there, dragons are quick to kill over their gold. It's
because that's what they actually consume. That's like what they live off of is gold. It's a misconception that they actually eat stuff.
Oh, so they're not traveling around terrorizing villages, eating children.
Yeah, it's kind of like Smaug, in the Hobbit books. He didn't destroy anybody for years. He just lived on his pile of gold. And as soon as they came in to mess with his gold, that's when he woke up.
That's when he gave a shit. Okay, bro. So in interest of time, I'll wrap us up there. So great insights once again, gents. Thanks very much for kind of giving us this deeper understanding of what's influencing these cards. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'll leave it for part 3. I'll save that question for part 3.
Okay.
It's a good one. Yeah. So folks, thanks to Daniel and Craig once again. Please do give us a thumbs up for Daniel and Craig coming out and helping me out with this Dungeons & Dragons background and lore to these cards. Hit the like and subscribe. check out one of the videos on the right-hand side and come back for part 3.